Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our educational session, Racial Justice at Historically Black Colleges and Universities Lens. My name is Naya Blair Hackworth. My pronouns are she and her, and I serve as the Director of Inclusion in the NCAA Office of Inclusion. Our session highlights the continuous work and value that historically Black colleges and universities have always played in higher education and their legacy of championing racial equity. We are excited to have our esteemed panelists who will highlight their work within their conferences and athletic departments that not only advance racial equity, but foster cultures of belonging for their student athletes and overall student population. As a reminder, this session is being recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing within 48 hours of the conclusion of today's presentation. You can also access the recording and the session information on the digital convention platform. And you can also view and participate in the convention sessions via the NCAA Convention app. The app version of the digital convention platform available in Apple App and Google Play stores. Please note that this is a new app and not the NCAA Events app used previously. NCAA Convention, or NCAA COV, hashtag, and utilize and follow inside the NCAA for updates throughout the convention. And if you hear some information that you can utilize or something inspiring, which I'm sure you will, please engage with us via social media using the NCAA CONV hashtag. Now, I would like to introduce our talented leader, Felicia Martin, Interim Vice President for Inclusion, Education, and Community Engagement for the NCAA, and Vice President of the NCAA Eligibility Center, who will moderate today's panel. Felicia?
Thank you, Naya. Good afternoon. I am incredibly honored to facilitate this dialogue. Please do not allow my scratchy throat to distract you from the amazing panelists who are gathered with us today. HBCUs play a major role and have a strong history of making significant contributions to the racial diversity of professional occupations such as law, politics, business, and medicine. It should also be noted the significant role of HBCUs and the role they play in developing individuals who are civically engaged on issues related to social justice. One writer described HBCUs as serving as incubators of civil rights activities. What an amazingly rich lineage filled with innovators, trendsetters, and barrier breakers that paved the way for us to flourish today. We are in for a treat. Before moving to introductions, I'd like to acknowledge that Gregory Moore, Commissioner of the Southern Intercollegiate Athletic Conference, is unable to join us today. We will miss his voice and perspective. However, there remains an esteemed group to enlighten and educate us on racial justice, as historically Black colleges and universities land. At this time, our panelists will share 1 or 2 minutes to introduce themselves and talk a bit about their professional background. Given their expansive careers and accomplishments, I'd encourage you to visit the convention site. There you'll find their complete bios and career highlights. Now, our panelists will introduce themselves. Raynard, would you like to get us started?
Thank you, Ms. Martin, and thank everyone for being on. Good afternoon. I'm ecstatic and pleased and humbled to be on this panel with this esteemed group of co-panelists, Ms. McWilliams and Ms. Pooler. So thank you. This topic is an awesome topic, and I'm more than happy and happy to discuss this topic. So I'm elated. A little about my background. I'm a first-time graduate, generation graduate. HBCU graduate at that. I went to Alcorn State University in Mississippi. After graduating, I went on and I taught and I coached in Jackson Public School District. From there, I moved on and I went to the Mideast Athletic Conference as an intern. And I always say this: 90% of my professional career has been in the HBCUs. So I've been bred in HBCUs. I live it and been working in HBCUs. So I love HBCUs and everything that it entails. I'm one of those student athletes. I was a student athlete. One of those student athletes that was given an opportunity. And I always look and always try to pay it forward, those opportunities. I've been here at the Mideast Athletic Conference now, going on to my 16th year. As I mentioned, I started as an intern, and I spent 1 year as an intern. Prior to that, I left and went to Coppin State, or HBCU. I was there as assistant athletic director for 1 year, where I worked in compliance, as well as worked with student athletes in SAC, which was huge. I love that portion of it. From there, I came back to the Mideast Athletic Conference as the assistant director for championships. I had several roles since being in the conference office. I've been assistant director of championship, director of championships, assistant commissioner for championship, senior associate commissioner, and to my current role as deputy commissioner. It's been a treat working with the Mideast Athletic Conference. The more so just seeing the student athletes graduate and then just their activism, the things that they have created as student athletes, and just the leaders as well, the different opportunities they have created and platforms. So I do yield it to the rest of my panelists, but I'm welcome. I'm happy to be on this panel. Thank you.
Raynard, thank you for that introduction. By the way, I am a Mississippian, so I am very familiar with Lorem, Mississippi, okay?
Awesome.
Also, before we move to Jackie, we do want to congratulate you on your recent promotion to Deputy Commissioner. Well done.
Thank you.
Jackie?
Thank you all for the opportunity to be here today with my colleagues. We all love HBCUs, so there's nothing like having conversations around the topic that we get to work in every day. And like Renoyd, I went to Hampton University, so I am HBCU. I started in HBCU, and it appears that I'm going to be ending up in HBCU in this career path that I love so much. From Colorado Springs, Colorado, I've spent probably 18 out of 27 years in this industry at HBCUs, both Division I and II. Had a stint in the MEAC, working at Norfolk State and also Morgan State for our compliance and operations. Worked at Virginia Union in Division II. I was the compliance assistant women's basketball coach with men's basketball for a stint, and also head volleyball coach, compliance, and SWA. So I can assure you at HBCUs, we definitely get experiences to prepare us for these moments here. And in between, I was at the NCAA for almost 10 years working in championships, and had the pleasure to work for both men's and women's basketball championships. And the greatest part about that is when you get to see HBCUs advance in the bracket, and had the chance to watch Norfolk State when we were in, I think it was Omaha, to see them advance to the next round. And so I'm definitely in this work. It's passion work. I've been at the CIAA as a commissioner 9 years. This was my dream job. And so I had the opportunity to come back to a conference that I played for, 2 sports at Hampton, won a national championship in basketball, and then to come back and try to create those same experiences for the student athletes has definitely been an honor, and very humbling to be here for the first HBCU conference that was created in the country. So thank you for having me here today.
No, Jackie, thank you. And please, I have to give a shout out to baby Commish. We can't have you here and not say anything about our succession planning.
Exactly.
Adina, tell us a little bit about your background.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank you guys for inviting me to be a part of this session. I've had the privilege of attending both the PWI and the HBCU, and being a proud 2-time graduate of South Carolina State University, former student athlete, 2-sport student athlete at both institutions. Started my career off at South Carolina State under athletic director Charlene Johnson at the time, and had a great mentor in her, and transitioned from the academic side to assistant athletic director to senior woman administrator at South Carolina State, and was able to, from San Antonio, was able to get a chance to get closer to home, and take an opportunity to work at Texas Southern University under Dr. Charles McClellan, and was able to become assistant athletic director there and work on getting our APR turned around, and part of that rebuilding of Texas Southern Athletic Department to where it is now. So I was very pleased, and when I had an opportunity to come to the Southwestern Athletic Conference to join Commissioner McClellan here in his staff as the Associate Commissioner for Internal Operations, and overseeing different sports and scheduling here at the conference office, and just pleased to be here.
Adina, like I said, I'm from Mississippi, so I know SWAC is where it's at. That's all I'm gonna say about that.
There you go.
Naya's already encouraged our audience to participate as far as social engagement, but our panelists are encouraging that engagement too. So we're going to encourage you to please tweet quotes, your thoughts, and share your feedback using the hashtag NCAACONV. That's NCAACONV, and follow at Inside the NCAA. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this conversation started. If you will, just imagine you just happen to be at the table next to us at Starbucks, and you hear a dialogue between friends, between colleagues, just talking it up about HBCUs. And for me, getting it started, I'm going to make a comment here and hear from Adina and Jackie, in that HBCUs have a long history of addressing the nation's problematic history with racism and equality, injustice. Adina, please share your thoughts on how HBCUs have modeled the way for racial justice. And then Jackie, we'll hear your thoughts.
Well, HBCUs were created mainly because African Americans did not have the right to receive an education. So many of our institutions are land-grant institutions. Alabama A&M, Alcorn State, Prairie View A&M, Florida A&M, Southern University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. And, they continue to make contributions in research. HBCUs provided educational access for African Americans who are low income, first generation, college students. And we provide a stable and nurturing environment for those students. We produce leaders in STEM disciplines, your science, your technology, your engineering, your mathematics, and even agriculture. So HBCUs, can be credited for producing a lot of those civil rights icons and world leaders. And so being productive citizens and most recently the Vice President, elect Kamala Harris, and so, for generations, training and educating the underserved population and the minorities is what we do. So that way we can go out and be productive and positive impacts in our communities.
Yeah, I agree. It's, I think about, golly, how so many of us are here because of them. And so many of us got to go to school because HBCUs were founded. And in some cases, that's still happening with students who can't afford to go to college. HBCUs have welcomed our students to give them the opportunity to get a degree. And when, like Adina says, when you think about the communities, let's just go Shaw University, first HBCU in the South, right? They're going to claim that forever in life because it's true. And you think about the racial issues that you have in the South and where all of our institutions have been founded and who's come out of those schools. Martin Luther King, right? I mean, you've got Bethune-Cookman, like those are people who have fought the fight and made those institutions or part of those institutions. Thurgood Marshall, right? A judge, like he went to Lincoln University, the first HBCU to even give a degree, even though Cheney State is the first HBCU that was founded. And so you have all these intersections of different universities that had a place to fight racism, depending on where they were and what was going on during that time. I think it's very important that we never forget the history of these founders of our schools. Lincoln University is named after President Lincoln. I've been in this conference for a long time, and it took me a while to just connect why that school was called Lincoln. So there's so much history of why our institutions are called what they're called, but there's also a lot of history of why we attended HBCUs because we weren't given the opportunity. And I mentioned Thurgood Marshall because he tried to get in the University of Maryland for law school and they declined him. So he went to Howard. And so when you think about those pioneers who wanted the opportunity to go to other schools but did not, they went to HBCUs. And what happens? We go and we believe and fight. We learn how to find our voice. We learn how to stand up. We learn how to fight for those things that are happening in our communities that are so important to our students and student athletes. So when I say students, I'm talking about student athletes as well.
Good. Jackie and Adina got us started with some of the history, Raynard, but let's go ahead and fast forward to summer 2020, how many of our athletic departments and conference offices elevated or even began some intentional focus on racial justice, involving their student athletes, involving their campuses and their coaches. How did your conference office lead and support your schools during that time?
I think 2020 is a time that we all going to remember. It's going to go in the history book as a shift in the culture. I thought it brought the eye to the world, what we all been seeing for years. And I thought it was good. It was good for the culture, and it was a restart. It's something that we all needed. Here at the conference office, we did lead it. We had some panel discussions with our SAC, and it was led by SAC. And what we did is we brought in sheriff, police officers, as well as doctors, medical doctors as well, and just discussed the mental aspect of it, as well as what was going on. And it was an open discussion, and it was great. The biggest part of it, just hearing those young student athletes and the passion they had behind it. If you're thinking about leaders that was young, their age, you're talking about your Jesse Jackson, your Martin Luther King, they were their age at the time. And just hearing their concept and how they view it through their lens, I learned a lot from it. And what we encourage them to do is to go back to your campus and continue to the efforts, right? Obviously, our lens is a lot different than most when you're at an HBCU, where you're surrounded around your peers. But to go back and teach, right? So that was their goal, to go back and show society through our lens, and also to make sure that society understands what we're going through. And they did a good job. They took the baton and they ran with it. We encouraged them. And same thing what we did with coaches as well as administrators. We asked them not to listen to them, right? Don't stifle them, but listen to them and see what they want to do, and then tell them, show them how to do it the right way. And that was big. So you had some that may have kneeled or sat during the national anthem, but they told you why, and they all had a reason why. So we're not just sitting or standing. Whatever we're doing it for a reason. And listen to our reason. We're trying to tell you. We want you to know why we're doing it. And I thought that was good. I can see them continuing it, and that's what we ask, to continue it. So don't let the 2020 go in vain. Continue it. You have everyone ears now. They're listening, and let's continue that march.
Good. Thank you, Raynard. There's a recent study conducted by the Ross Initiative in Sport for Equality, and the survey was more than 2,000 or so college student athletes, and found that 79% of those respondents felt that student athletes have an obligation to raise awareness, much like Raynard just exampled for us about social justice issues. In addition, 83% of student athletes surveyed were willing to speak up and do more about the issues related to student athlete activism. Jackie, talk to us a little bit about where the CIAA was and how they celebrated the activism and how it was connected also to the learning, growing, and development of CIAA student athletes.
Yeah, and I love what Raynard talked about in all of our conferences, doing the work to engage our students and hearing their voice. I'm going to go back to when House Bill 2 happened and we were dealing with the LGBT community. And the work that we've done with collaborating with national organizations dealing with LGBTQ, local organizations in DC, our SAC, like it becomes so much more than the CIAA when you're pulling in all these entities to help find voice for the people that you serve every single day. And what I love about the CIAA and just our HBCUs, period, our presidents are they're activists every day in the journey for a higher education, trying to get funding and money that they never received, trying to fight within their communities, addressing medical issues and curriculums, you name it. That just funnels down to athletics, right? So we get to be beneficial in our conference offices by sharing the voice of what they say. Students should always have a voice, and we should prepare them to have the voice. That's why we're in our positions, right? We didn't go to our institutions and not learn how to be activists, and we didn't even know we were being trained to be activists. We were taught to have our voice, to be prepared, to be ready, to communicate in a way to get the outcome. It's no different at our institution. You can't tell us not to kneel. You can't tell us not to protest. You can't tell us. And so what we do tell you is know the reasons why you're doing it, know what the outcomes you're seeking, and do it in a way that's going to benefit the community and not just yourself. And I think that's the piece in HBCUs where in our conference, and I'm sure all my colleagues' conferences too, that it is part of your educational experience. When colleagues ask you, well, what is your policy? We don't have a policy. The policy is we're allowing them to have voice. If they kneel, they understand why they're kneeling. We sing Lift Every Voice and Sing in every championship. It is my favorite part after singing the national anthem. And if people sit down and raise their fist on either one, that's their choice. We don't take that away from our student athletes. So I think there's something said about in higher education that we teach our students and student athletes to learn to use their voice and the platforms they have that we give them to share their voice, but do it in a way that supports what you're trying to get the outcome on.
So good. Thank you, Jackie. Dina, we know historically that the Southwestern Athletic Conference has produced some of the well-known leaders that y'all are already talking about that served in the forefront of civil rights movement. Medgar Wiley Evers comes to mind for me as a Mississippian again. I fly into Jackson's airport and I'm reminded every day. So talk to us about in what ways do you feel the conference can continue to support students that choose to pursue career paths rooted in social justice and equality initiatives? How do you think you and even the people who are watching can sustain your racial justice efforts and even broaden the reach to a point that Jackie's making?
You know, being in an environment that promotes Black excellence, right? Celebrates the cultural traditions that we have, promotes unity for many. HBCUs give that safe place for minority student athletes and students that allows you to be part of a community that understands and has those shared experiences. Commissioner McWilliams and I think Mr. Dito mentioned, kind of about the kneeling. The Black Lives Matter movement was, one of the recent movements. And it brought plight to many of the feelings our HBCU students felt, student athletes that are, they're discriminated against and challenged to overcome, triple jeopardy, being a minority, being a student athlete, attending an HBCU. And our institutions are able to provide a safe environment for those students to deal with the challenges and to overcome those challenges. And a lot of our civil rights, activists that you mentioned, they were able to be in an environment, amongst themselves that were safe being at these institutions. And it's important that you recognize the heroes and the sheroes of the past through sharing their stories and honoring their legacies and their advocacy that they've done for so long for us.
I heard somebody repeat something along the lines of when you're talking about athletics, you can't have that conversation without talking about money, talking about higher ed and funding. And in a report conducted by the McKinsey Institute for Black Economic Mobility and the McKinsey Global Institute Research and Calculations, HBCUs have the potential to produce nearly $10 billion in additional Black worker income, $1.2 billion in incremental business profit, $300 million in decreased student loan debt, and $1 billion in additional consumer expense. Those are some numbers. Raynard, what would you like to share with our audience about the economic value that our HBCUs bring to our community?
I'm saying this facetiously, but how much time do we have?
Come on, go for it.
And I'm sure Ms. Fuller and Commissioner McWilliams would love to join in this one. These numbers are not surprising. I think we all know this, right? African Americans are the number one consumers of Coca-Cola, Nike, and so forth. And we have a spending power that's always been around. And HBCUs, to me, just enlightens that, right? From the community, that they reach out. How many people they employ just in that community? We can go to every HBCU in the country, and I guarantee you, someone's family member, whether it's their aunt, their granddad, their mother, in that community that worked at that university and so forth. And then just the graduates, right? Our graduates are outstanding. As Ms. Pula mentioned earlier, HBCUs make up I want to say over 60% of the STEM, the education just out there. One of the big things, if you're just looking at the middle class, African American middle class, HBCUs make up 75% of that graduate from HBCUs. That's huge. That is huge. And so HBCUs have done it for years. This from the beginning, as we mentioned when we was talking about the creation and why we started HBCUs. And that spending power has always been, and it will continue. It will continue. The biggest compliment I would say is you see a lot of corporate America is recognizing it, right? So when you seeing those numbers that we have, whether they're coming back and partnering with the CIAA, the Southwestern Athletic Conference, the Mideastern Athletic Conference, they're coming back and they're acknowledging that spending power. And I think it's past due, but it's not never too late, right? So we're welcoming it, but at the same time we're educating them as well. And we let them know how much we do spend and how much we will continue to spend. One of my favorite things is always invest in who invests in you. Right. And you see it. And then I think they're recognizing it. We watch a lot of TV. What I mean by that, so ESPN and your Fox and so forth. We're a consumer that we spend a lot. And I think that the best portion of this report is showing it on paper, that how much we do and how much we will continue to do.
I hope our audience. Go ahead.
Can I add something to that?
Absolutely.
I love that Reno said that because we should no longer have to justify our being in our community, period, and why we exist in the nation. So I want all of our colleagues to see us as a valued member of the association, but a valued member in this country. Many of our athletes would not be at your institution based on history. We know that because of where they started, right? My parents are from Jackson, Mississippi. I have family members that can only go to Jackson State. Only Jackson State, unless they went to SWAT, Southern Alabama, which I got family members too. So just know I'm in rivalry with y'all. But at the end of the day, these institutions and our conferences are so important and valued to the economic. If you watched the Celebration Bowl, did you see who was in the audience? People were hungry to be a part of a culture and an atmosphere that celebrated them. That's economic power. CIAA having a tournament with 150,000 people and over $600 million in one city in 15 years, that's economic power. And it just didn't value for Black people, it valued for the entire community. And I think that's the thing that we can't forget. The numbers are real, the jobs are real, the opportunities that we provide as higher education institutions, they're real.
Oh my gosh, I hope the audience is catching all these tweetables because I can't keep up. Always invest in what invests in you. The numbers are real. We are value add. It's amazing. I'm going to pause right now and just remind our audience that we are going to take a couple more questions, but then we're going to reach out to the chat feature and take some questions from you. So please, if you have questions of our panelists, now's the time. So one of the reasons that I know the team and I thought that this session, one, was an incredible opportunity, but another is the intentionality behind making certain that we have sessions where people have takeaway, that they have lessons learned, they can take, information back to their campuses for their programming. And I'm going to ask the panel, what lessons can our colleagues at PWIs learn and implement when it comes to creating, leading, and sustaining racial justice efforts and supporting our student athletes? Adina, we'll start with you and then Jackie.
Sure. The Southwestern Athletic Conference has recently partnered with the Pac-12 Conference for what we truly feel is a remarkable experience for our student athletes and our 12-member institutions. It is an educational and scheduling partnership that will feature annual home and home series between our member institutions starting 2022-2023 season. The men and women's basketball partnership, is created to aim and to give a forum for competition and education, to promote the promotion of education around issues that we have, anti-racism and social justice. And it's never, occurred in the history of HBCU athletics, creating this partnership. So, we'll have 6 institutions that will start in 2022, and it'll be a home and away The schedule is posted on our website for you all to see with the links. So they'll do a home and home series in 2022, 2023. And then the next 6 institutions will do the same. So you have these Pac-12 schools coming to our campuses where normally, we go to theirs, right? We go to theirs to play these guaranteed games. And now it's bringing them to our campuses and showing them our campuses. And there will be educational opportunities. Administrators will have conversations. Student athletes will be able to interact with each other from both institutions. Creating that environment, again, that safe environment, giving them opportunities they wouldn't normally maybe have. To talk to some of our student athletes to talk to them and talk about their experiences and have real life conversations. That's kind of what makes our HBCUs unique, is our family atmosphere that we create, and being able to showcase that. And in our instance, in our Pac-12 alliance that we have, was a great opportunity to do that.
Good. Jackie?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think as our colleagues invite us to their campuses, we want you to come to our campuses too. As you schedule us and you see us, just coming to your campus to play, we want you to come play on our campuses too. So I think, the stigma of being the lower resource institutions, and we don't have that. I would like our colleagues to start thinking differently about how great our institutions are. Historically, they are, and the improvements we've had, even with less money and resources, that we're still providing our students an opportunity to compete. There are so many lessons, I do believe, that can be learned by working together with institutions within our communities. And you're seeing some of it when you see the rivalries, what Duke is playing some of our institutions in basketball and other sports. I mean, there's something said there. That's something that our student athletes, whether they win or lose, there's an opportunity to see that there's an ability to bring our institutions in the fold of your own history and how we bring that together. The other things are just on the educational side, but even on the athletic side, how you bring all that together. Like Dillard University, Shaw University, UDC, they have all have created these civil rights campus on their campuses, these museums or whatever you call them. They're a great opportunity for schools to partner with them to learn more about how to manage racism on their camp. Like, you can collaborate with HBCUs. I think we're just great at the work and how you can see our institutions being part of that. Doug Williams Center for Racial Justice at Grambling State, I'm on that advisory board. I would encourage everybody to go on there. There's great research on there. There's, things on there that could really support what you're doing on your campuses, that would help support, race, gender, politics, all of that, just in America, in sports, period. Another example, Bowie State is working with the University of Maryland. In 2007, a young man who was just graduating from Bowie State, didn't even get to graduation, was murdered on their campus by a student. And so there's a collaboration amongst those two institutions to deal with those inequities and in that conversation. So there's so many opportunities that I think within where our HBCUs reside, I know a lot of our presidents are working and collaborating with other presidents on their campuses, but engage our student athletes as well. I think that's a piece where our students can go to a campus and feel isolated on a campus for a sport. And that's what you don't, and it's still happening. They're still being called names on the side, which is disheartening. And so as a commissioner, when you get those calls, and trying to manage expectations with your colleagues is difficult. But I think when you get the call, you can appreciate at least it's been addressed.
Yeah, that's good. That's so good. Some more data here. According to the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, HBCUs represent 3% of all colleges and universities, but produce 26% of all Black American graduates. I think this is a point that Raynard was, edging right up against. It talked on about HBCUs enrolling the top academically strong students and non-traditional students that are first generation, come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds and under-resourced communities. Therefore, it is a great balancing act for HBCU leaders to provide students with the resources and the support they need to stay and graduate. That's definitely something we all need to talk about on our campuses, not just staying, but and graduating. So let's discuss how HBCUs value in graduating a significant number of Black American graduates who face several obstacles to overcome. Jackie, I've heard you talk a little bit about this, about what those challenges are and how conferences and schools can partner in and around helping our students to overcome those challenges. Share a little bit with.
Yeah, it's so when we get our graduation rate report every year, I'm just like, why are we always at the bottom? What is it that we have to do as a conference to help elevate that APR as amongst our NCAA colleagues? And what I realize is, despite what it looks like, it's not exactly that. Our kids are graduating. What we do know is that, we recruit students, or students come to our institution, some from a lot of lower income families. They depend on scholarships to go to college. If they don't get them, they don't finish, or they have to come back. They have to make some hardcore decisions. There's research and study about that, because I've been just like, what do we need to do differently? I watch the MEAC and the SWAC as they have these requirements, as low resource institutions, and getting funding to help support the graduation rate. And as much as we want them to be in the pack with our PWIs, I don't know if that's really going to happen, just based on historically the students that we recruit. And it's not a bad thing. So I would like us to think, to stop looking at it as if it's bad and we're not recruiting students. Because as you read off, we are graduating students. We're focused on STEM. Now we're trying to get them in this eSport tech. All of us have eSports program, and our students are killing the game. I mean, there's so much. We're getting techs and scientists. We have doctors. A lot of our students are getting their PhDs from our institutions and going and taking that somewhere else. So I just think, we can read off numbers. I just think perception has us as if we're not doing well. And we're absolutely doing well. Our athletes finish. And when they don't, they have reasons not to finish. But at the end of the day, I finished. My parents couldn't afford for me to go to Hampton, and look where I'm sitting. And all of us can say that. So our focus is very different than what maybe other institutions. We're trying to create culture where these young men and young women will be model citizens, will give back, will be activists, and will be coaches and commissioners and all those other things, freshmen all the way to their senior year. And if they have to stay another year, we're still following them. They are our kids. That's what they're our young adult kids. We don't want a bunch more, but they are people that we care about and want to ensure that they have that experience. So the graduation rate, yes, they drive me crazy, but I know why. And it's not an excuse. It's the reality of the foundation of our institutions and what has been given to us to compete with the rest of our institutions in the community.
Well said. Well said. We do have some questions that have come through the portal. I'm going to start with a couple, and then if there are other questions, we'll get to as many of them as possible. But for the panel, as an HBCU grad and former employee, I will always have an affinity for the HBCU community. With that being said, what are your thoughts on the HBCU growing in the future? I think I read that right.
And I can jump right in if you don't mind. I think if you just with the culture that we're in right now and the amount of attention that HBCUs has been receiving, I think we're going to continue to grow. And I hate to use the word fad, and some uses that way, but I hate to use it. But it's a trend, right? So you see athletes, professional athletes wearing different HBCU shirts. You see actors wearing it, but it brings attention, and I think that attention is well needed. And the biggest part of it, once you experience HBCU, you're going to go back. It's going to sell itself, right? So you're going to go to share that experience, and it's going to continue. And you're seeing more graduates send their kids back to HBCUs, which are good, right? You want them to send them back, and so I think it's going to continue to grow, and the sky's the limit.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't think we stopped growing. I just think I think we're in this position. A question was asked me today, the same question, is this like this movement? It's always a movement for us. We always want kids to come to our institutions. I hope there's a generation of parents, because once again, integration happened, students coming to HBCUs changed. Not necessarily a bad thing. It just changed how people made decisions and the opportunities. I would say that every student should think about their top 5 or 10 and listen to HBCU. No matter what color you are, look at HBCUs as an opportunity to get your degree and to go to college and play the game.
Athletics plays a huge, part in the publicity of our HBCUs. And, more so, we have coming up on ESPN is scheduled to air 4 of our men's basketball regular season contests, while NBA TV is getting ready to air 2 of our men's basketball regular season games and 2 of our women's basketball regular season games. So, bringing that notoriety back to mainstream media, right, keeps us in the forefront, keeps that growth coming, allows everyone to see some of the positive things that we're doing that they may not see, through athletics. Athletics plays, a piece in admissions, for students to want to be part of what's going on and all the things that we're doing on our campuses.
Before I get to the next question, I got to admit, when Raynard made that comment about celebrities and other people wearing HBCU gear, I felt red. Because when we got on the call, I saw Jackie's HBCU t-shirt. I was like, where can I buy one of those?
I'll see you later.
Next question from the audience. What recent initiatives are you most proud of that support student athletes' multiple identities?
Wow. I would say, all of our sports are important and necessary. I think our greatest platform to do that is our basketball tournament. We have the ability to take all 14 of our championships and include it in that championship of 2 throughout an entire week. And that could be on inclusion, diversity, LGBT conversations. That could be on women. We're celebrating Title IX this year. And we're still trying to figure out, again, as Black women, how Title IX has benefited us in the athletic space. But those are real conversations and good ones to have. From health disparities. I think every piece of what we deal with from the time you were born until the time you transition, that our conference is trying to make those connections with our fans, our alumni, and sponsors. And our tournament is the greatest opportunity. It's a lot of work because you're trying to focus on basketball game, which is the center of what we do. But we feel like we have a responsibility to do more in the community, to do exactly the question that you asked. How do we connect and intersect with every demographic that needs the voice of the Black community?
And I will echo Commissioner McWilliams on one other step, and it's just that today's society is social media, right? So we encourage the use of social media, but in a proper way, right? To get your message out and ensure that whatever that message is, you have information behind it that can be helpful to the mass who you're sharing it with. So we do encourage that with our student athletes, and they're going to do it regardless, right? Whether we encourage them or not. So our efforts is always trying to teach them and how to do it and get their message out, right? And get it out in a proper way where it can be helpful to the mass that's taking it in.
The next question is, how have HBCUs been actively engaged in lessening the impact of COVID-19?
Well, I'll jump in on this one. One, when the studies first came out, it had a high impact on African Americans, right? That was a study, and it's ever changing. So I think this COVID is something that we all learning. You have a study that come out almost every other month with different things or different stats. But I think we jumped out there early on. When I say we as African American HBCUs, we was pretty protective, right? So we was testing more than the most. We were wearing masks, we were social distancing, and so forth. And I think we kind of set the tone as HBCUs. Even now, we have institutions, even whatever your city or state, we're still mandating proof of vaccination. You're still wearing masks where you have masks is optional. So I think we set the tone. When I say we, mean HBCUs, and it's shown. And you can continue to see it with the numbers, right? From from games canceled to games continuing. I think that's just been huge, and it's always been bigger to us, right? So we always had the student athletes welfare has always been part of HBCU. So it's always been bigger than the game. I commend Commissioner McWilliams. She was one of their conference was one of the first when this pandemic first started to just freeze on activities. And I thought that set a big tone, and it was showing that, hey, it's bigger than the sports. We want to protect these athletes and moving forward. It's bigger than that sport and so forth. But I definitely think that we as HBCUs have set the tone.
We've got a few more questions. What are some ways you have supported and empowered your student athletes' holistic development? What are some ways you've supported and empowered your student athletes' holistic development?
Well, I make myself available to our student athletes. I mean, I'm on their social media, they're on mine. Not that I want to see everything they have, but I think the way that we structure ourselves with our platforms, working with our staff, how Dr. Thomas, let me just mention Dr. Thomas. Dr. Thomas was my athletic director at Hampton University. He was the one that helped me get my first job at Virginia Union, and he advocated for me to be in this position as well. So that's the way HBCUs work with our students. Our presidents know their students by name. They know their athletes by name. Matter of fact, they compete. When I get on a board call, they are sharing how many rings they have for championships. That's the culture that we live in. I think, making sure that our student athletes know that they are being fought for, advocate, and we care about them. When we made decisions last, and they were tough decisions to cancel championships, we didn't do that isolated. We talked to our student athletes. We wanted to know what they felt because we knew the impact it would have, but we assured them that we were feeling the same impact that they were emotionally and sort of, because this is what we do. We are event people. We push out great championships. We run meetings. That's what we do. And so to be at a halt and not be able to communicate with your best asset would have been a problem. And I think the way that we communicate with our students, even with the House Bill 2, when we canceled or moved 8 championships out of the state of North Carolina, we communicated that with our students. And it wasn't just about basketball. It was about how does this affect the entire conference and every championship that would be moved. So they're our best asset.
There are a couple questions that I want to get to before we have to end the time today. And I'm going to admit that one of these questions is pretty selfish, but I didn't submit it. But I'd like to hear from the panel, what more can the NCAA do to support HBCUs?
I'm gonna let my colleagues go because I can run fast.
Renard, Adina?
Yeah, I'll jump in. And I'm laughing at Commissioner McWilliams. That's funny.
We know each other. So that's why she's like, I can run on them.
The list is long, but what I will say is I do commend the NCAA because they do listen, right? And they have done that since the invention of the NCAA. They have always listened. But I think the voice is big. Hearing as Commissioner McWilliams mentioned before, our structure is so different than most, right? It just from the foundation why we were started. So to give us a voice so we can make sure when decisions are made that we're included, right? So inclusion is huge for that HBCU voice. So to ensure that we have that voice in any decision that's made, I think that's going to be huge.
Yeah, I do. I agree. And I think all 3 divisions have to be mindful. And when you say the NCAA, let me talk about just the association, because we're the NCAA and we have the opportunity to make sure that we have diversity and inclusion on our committees. And when we don't, we need advocates to make sure that happens. Same thing with Raynoid. We want the opportunity to have that vote, but you got to have people at the table. And so I think there's help, and staff has done. Felicia, let me just commend you and your team for the work that you have done in our leadership development. We continue to need that. There's so many people who have been through that programming that have landed jobs and opportunities because of that programming. I'm a beneficiary of the minority postgraduate scholarship to go to Temple. If I didn't have that, I'm not sure I could afford it to go to college, to graduate school. So there's so many great things that are happening that we should amplify what you're already doing. And then again, collectively as HBCUs, we continue to work to identify those things that we need you all to help us with, not just in the office, but through the association as well.
I think giving us just to kind of piggyback off of what everyone said, making sure that that we're represented on a lot of the committees. You all give out a lot of committees that are in the NCA for us to be a part of, and just making sure that we're represented on those committees to serve and given the opportunity to serve on those committees.
Good. We'll take this last question and then do closing thoughts, but tell the audience, tell us, how can we help to tell the HBCU story, and how can HBCUs tell their stories more and on multiple platforms, things that you're already doing or ideas you have for the audience and any of the partners and allies that are out there?
Well, I know Renoy mentioned the social media platform is huge for us, and we use it. I think across Division I, CIAA is like in the top 15 or 20 on our social media following, which is pretty great. I mean, we have a PR firm that we work with as well to help us with amplifying, our brand and who we are and the impact that we have in engaging our students. I think that right there is extremely important and helpful that we use that platform. And we have, and I'll leave it there and let Renoy and Adina go, because I like to talk about HBCUs. So
I think one of the biggest part is telling our story, right? And getting it out there. So the more we get our stories out, similar, the MEAC does as well. We hired a PR firm to shoot those stories to the audience that may wouldn't get that information. So that's huge too, making sure you're telling your own story.
I actually going to agree with both sentiments. Not much to add, really. Social media is huge. Like I said, getting your story out there, making sure that the institutions are telling their story. Right? We as a conference office come in and try to help assist telling those stories, but making sure our institutions are telling their own stories to their local media outlets, to all the local communities, getting out into the communities, educating the communities, and starting locally. And then as conference offices, we can help develop that nationally and build different platforms to showcase those stories.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to have to wrap us up. I have so enjoyed this, and I hope our audience has. We needed another hour or more for different topics, and then allowing each of our panelists to school us more on the things that their conferences and their universities are doing best. I'd like to thank our panelists for this insightful conversation. We are grateful for your leadership, your efforts, and your commitments to advancing racial justice. So I'm going to pause for our virtual audience to give a virtual round of applause to Adina, to Jackie, and to Reynard. I'd also like to thank our audience for tuning in, for your questions, and for your attention. Please complete the session survey. To access the survey, click on the session title in the agenda tab. From there, click survey to complete the brief 3-question survey. We need to know what you thought. Additionally, don't forget to join the conversation on social media. I hope you caught those tweetables and you have them under the hashtag NCAACONV hashtag or the Inside the NCAA for updates throughout the convention. Well, that concludes our session today. Racial Justice, a historically Black colleges and university lens. I think it's fitting for me to close by offering a quote from an influential figure in the fight for Black liberation in the South, Fannie Lou Hamer. Never to forget where we came from and always praise the bridges that carried us over. Thank you for being with us. Be well.